Hi everyone, I'm Cheryl and welcome to the Sewing Room channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate how to put a sleeve in a blouse, jacket, or dress. And I'll show you two different ways. One is a little more complicated. The other way, of course, is super easy. If you are a beginner and you don't know how to read pattern instructions, I will have a link listed below your YouTube screen in the description section, and it's how to read clothing pattern instructions. Okay, let's get started. While you're watching this demonstration, make sure you pay attention to the symbols on your pattern pieces. These markings are so that you make sure you put the left sleeve on the left side and the right sleeve on the right side. If you do not get the sleeves on the correct size, you're going to wonder why the blouse just doesn't feel right. Now, this first method is how I learned way many years ago, and it's a little more complicated, a little bit more difficult to do. And then the next method I'll show you is a lot easier. It's very important that you mark your fabric for the other notches that are on your pattern pieces, because there is a left sleeve and a right sleeve. And if you stitch them on the wrong side of your blouse or jacket, it's not going to fit right. So make sure that you do your notches for matching your seams. And I have one here and there's two here. So on your pattern pieces for the bodice is the front and back sections, you're going to see the double knot on the back section. So that's to make sure that you match the correct piece together. You've also got circles up here. This top one is to match your center seam at the shoulder, and these two here, these lines, are for where you're going to do gathering stitches. So before you insert the sleeve in, you want to do some large basting stitches. And you're going to do 2 rows. Do your first row about 1/8 of an inch from this raw edge, and then do a second row right there at the raw edge. And these are going to be used to what we call ease this fabric into the sleeve. We don't want it to be an obvious gather. It's just a slight puckering of the fabric so that you can ease it in to go up around the cap here of your shoulder. It might be helpful to some of you if you use a different color of thread on the bottom than on the top, because when you go to gather, you want to make sure you're pulling on the 2 top threads, which are my green ones. So you want to make sure you pull the bottom threads out of the way, and then you just pull against them, gradually gathering it up. And so as you can see, it's already curved in, enough. You don't need too much of a gather for it to fit over your shoulder. Before you put the sleeve in, you need to match your shoulder seams. So bring those little dots together, or notches if you cut them out, and place a few pins across the shoulder. Now, your pattern instruction sheet will tell you what the seam allowance is, but for most clothing, it'll be 5/8 of an inch right across here. I'm going to be using a serger to do almost all of the seams in a blouse. And this is what a serged seam looks like. Now, a serger cuts the raw edges down and then binds the edges as it also stitches across here. So it's one step. If you do not have a serger, then of course do a 5/8 inch wide seam if that's what your pattern tells you to do, and stitch a straight stitch across here. Then to bind your edges, especially if you're using fabric that unravels. You don't need to worry about this if your fabric doesn't unravel. And then you can do a zigzag stitch across here. Most of your computerized sewing machines have at least 1 or more overcast stitches, so you can select one of those. And this is what my shoulder seam looks like right here. Now take your sleeve And you're going to bring the sides together and match your notches or your dots and place pins all along the edge here. And then stitch, it's probably 5/8 of an inch. Go ahead and stitch and bind your edges on your sleeve. Take your back section and your front section, bring them right sides together, and then stitch your side seam. Again, read your pattern instructions for the correct seam allowance. Turn your sleeve front side out. You're going to insert the sleeve into the armhole and match this dot to your shoulder seam. So when you're inserting your sleeve, you want to match the little dots here. This is used for matching your seam. You want to put those in. And then you remember the little lines, that was for where the gathering stitches started. You want to match those up. Put a pin at the shoulder seam here, and there's the dot to match the shoulder seam. What you want to make sure is that the sleeve fabric that's been slightly gathered should lay fairly flat. It'll have a slight puckering to it. So you'll probably have to use a lot of pins to hold this down. So place a lot of pins. At the in the armpit area, what I did was I pushed the seam on the bottom in the opposite direction than the seam on top. Once you have everything pinned in place, then go ahead and stitch the recommended seam allowance. So on this previous method, your side seams were stitched together first, and then the sleeve was inserted in. On this next method, your sleeve is stitched up at the shoulder seam first, and then your side seams are stitched. So in this method, you don't stitch any side seams together. You go ahead and bring your sleeve up into the armhole area, match all of the markings, then stitch it along that edge. Then you open everything up, bring front sides together on your bodice side seam and your sleeve side seam, and then stitch it all down at one time. Here is a blouse in which it has a completely different style of sleeve. There is no shoulder seam going over this way. The seams, there's one on the back and here. This is a really easy sleeve to put in. So if you're a beginner, I recommend you would start with something like this. Now I do have a link to this particular tutorial that will show you how to make the entire blouse. So to get started, this is a nice basic pattern if you are a beginner. Now all of the links are in your description section below your YouTube screen. So scroll down, click on the word more, and that section will expand open. Also, while you're down there, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and check out my Facebook page. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, and happy sewing. If you like the Sewing Room channel, one of the best ways to show your support is to subscribe by clicking on that red subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to click on share to share this video with your friends. And make sure you click on the bell so you receive notifications for all my new videos. I'm Cheryl, this is Manny, and this is Scotty. See you next time.